Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a pretty wild idea from an author named Xiaoyang Lin. He argues that everything from family squabbles all the way up to international wars, it all comes down to one thing: a failure of language. And the solution? You might not guess it, but it could be artificial intelligence. Okay, to get our heads around this, let's start with a really simple question, or at least it seems simple. Xiaoyang Lin uses this to kind of blow up everything we assume about reality. The question is grass really green? Now, I know what you're thinking. Duh, of course it is. But hold on, because it's way more complicated than you think. So the answer, according to Lin, is actually no. Grass doesn't have any color on its own. What we call green is just how our brains decide to interpret a bunch of electrical signals coming from our eyes. And get this, as you can see here, a dog's brain interprets those exact same signals totally differently. To them, it's more of a yellowish color. And here's the kicker, neither one of us is wrong. We're just living in completely different realities. And that brings us to the crucial point of all of this. We are all living in our own subjective world. There's no single objective reality that we can all tap into and agree on. And for Xiaoyang Lin, this huge gap between our internal worlds, well, that's the root of almost all of our problems. Okay, so here's the game plan for breaking down Xiaoyang Lin's incredible argument. First, we'll dig a little deeper into these different realities. Then we'll look at the huge communication gap that creates. We'll see how that scales up into conflict. And finally, we'll get to his really mind-bending solution: AI as the Universal Translator. All right, let's jump right in. Part 1, our different realities. Let's talk about why we really do all live in our own little worlds. You know, it's not just about color, it's everything. As Lin points out, a bee sees the world in these ultraviolet patterns on flowers that are completely invisible to us. A goldfish, it probably sees you as this weird blob of infrared and ultraviolet light. Even something as basic as the ground feeling solid. I mean, at an atomic level, it's almost all empty space. Lin's whole point is that every sensation we have, sight, sound, touch, it's all just our brain's best guess. It's an interpretation, not reality itself. Okay, so our internal worlds are so unique and different. How on earth are we supposed to share them with each other? And that leads us right into the next big problem, what Lin calls the Great Communication Gap. Xiaoyang Lin breaks it down into this 4-step process. See, it all starts with a raw individual experience. Think of it like a video playing in your brain. That experience creates a feeling. Then your brain takes that feeling and connects it to all your past experiences, and that creates your unique perception. And over time, all those perceptions pile up and create what Lin calls your individual culture, basically your personal set of truths. The real challenge, though, is how do you get any of that out of your head and into someone else's? And this right here, this is the heart of the problem. No matter what we do, words, art, music, you name it, it's all a distorted translation of what's really going on inside. It's like we're trying to describe that perfect high-definition video in our head, but all we can give the other person is a fuzzy black and white photo with half of it missing. Something always gets lost in translation. Okay, this is where things get really fascinating. Because Lin doesn't just stop at individual communication problems. He scales this whole idea up to the societal level, showing how these tiny misunderstandings can blow up into global conflicts. Yeah, he comes up with this term, the experience community. Lin's idea here is that our societies, our towns, our countries, our cultures, are all built on a collection of these shared, but ultimately fuzzy and imprecise individual truths. Think about it. Our laws, our moral codes, they're all based on these imperfect, subjective translations of what we think is right. And the result? Well, it's pretty much inevitable. Conflict. Lin's argument is that because the very foundation of our societies is flawed, built on misunderstanding, our systems are just riddled with contradictions and loopholes. And he makes the bold claim that every single fight, from a small argument with your family to a massive war between nations, comes from this one single source: our failure to truly, perfectly understand each other. But okay, it's not all doom and gloom. Lin doesn't just identify this massive problem and leave us hanging. He actually proposes a pretty wild, revolutionary solution to this age-old human dilemma. Now, to get his idea, let's first think about something we're all familiar with: third-party payment systems, like PayPal. Remember back in the day, buying something from a stranger online was super sketchy, right? You'd ask yourself, do I send the money first? What if they don't send the item? These services solved that trust problem completely. They became a trusted middleman, guaranteeing the deal for both people. Okay, you ready for the leap? This is Xiaoyong Lin's big idea. He says AI can be the third-party payment for communication. It can be that perfect, impartial translator that sits between two minds, completely removing the distortion, the risk, the misunderstanding that has caused so much trouble for humanity throughout our entire history. So, you might be wondering, how does this AI get to be this perfect translator? Well, it's a multi-step process. First, scientists design its brain, which is a neural network. Then, they feed it the biggest textbook ever written, pretty much the entire internet. The AI then studies this material by making trillions and trillions of predictions and correcting itself when it's wrong. And all of this is driven by a massive engine of computing power.
And then, when we actually go to use it, the whole thing is incredibly smooth. You ask a question, that's called a prompt. A little digital waiter, an API, takes your request to the AI brain. The AI then thinks, using all of its training to figure out the absolute best answer. And then that waiter brings the response right back to you. It becomes this flawless go-between for information. All right, let's bring this all home. In this final section, we're going to see how all of this builds into Xiaoyang Lin's incredibly hopeful and optimistic vision for what our future could look like.
So, the end game here, according to Lin, is not just about writing better essays for school or funnier emails. It's about achieving perfect, lossless understanding between people. I mean, can you even imagine that? Being able to perfectly transmit exactly what you're thinking and feeling into someone else's mind with zero distortion and getting the same back from them? And Lin really doesn't hold back. He concludes with this incredibly powerful and honestly beautiful vision. He says, this will be the greatest revolution in human history. It will eliminate war and accelerate the process of building a common home for all humanity. I mean, wow. So, that leaves us with one final massive question to think about. If Xiaoyang Lin is right, if this technology can actually tear down the final barrier that has always separated us, what becomes possible then? When misunderstanding is no longer an option or an excuse, what kind of world will we actually choose to build together?